Morning, Michael. How are you?
Morning, Jenny. How are you?
So we had no title slide this morning.
Well, we had emergencies.
Yeah, so this is what happens when you're a farmer. I went out in our upper pasture this morning where we have some sheep and was going, what is all this wire on the ground? And we have a hot wire all the way around the fence, and somebody pulled the hot wire down off the fence and drug it all over the pasture. And I'm like, that's not going to work, because all you're going to do is get caught up in it. And then I'm going to have an injury that's going to require somebody to go to the vet. So I'm like, no, the world has to stop while I get all of that mess cleaned up. So, yay. You've got your freedom shirt on, and I've got my Don't Make Me Do a Beth Dutton on your shirt on. So
my freedom shirt has a little caveat. The O here is the Bitcoin symbol.
Oh, I see.
Because that's what we're gonna talk about, crypto and freedom, and I'm gonna hopefully I didn't do a lot of slides because, well, first of all, I didn't want to be here
because you're lazy.
Well, no, I didn't want to be here for 2 hours, because if I start doing slides, then I really start getting into all the detail and the weeds. So I want to try to keep it as summary and give people the best, just simple understanding of what all this stuff is, why it's important, why we need it, where we're going to go, how, and the future is based on this stuff. I mean, this crypto and the word currency is it doesn't really apply. It's a technology, is more or less, but everything that we have and do in the future is going to revolve around this technology. I can tell you that.
Well, there's a part of me that's actually frightened by that. I'll just tell you.
Well, and I'll touch on that.
Because, and I look at it like this: we have been trained. Honestly trained to believe that dollar bill, right? I mean, you got to touch it, you got to feel it. It is a thing. And that is what we should have. I mean, that's what we should have in our pockets. That's what we should be exchanging for. And it's interesting to me, really, that we've been so, and I won't say propagandized, because I don't think that's necessarily true. I think after about 1913, that was fairly true. But I think up until then, it really did mean something. They had that piece of currency pegged to a gold standard, and whatever you did meant something. But I also remember too, there were, and this actually still happens out here in the boonies where we all live, hey, I'll trade you some eggs for some lamb chops, so we've gotten into this habit of thinking that money is that dollar bill, is that piece of paper.
Yeah.
But money is really just something that you exchange for something that you want more than this piece of paper or this rock or this shell or whatever. And so I do think that it is going to require us to think in a different way about how we purchase things moving forward. And I think maybe that's where we need to start every time we try to talk about something like this, because I know there are a lot of people out there that are like me, who are like, you're never going to get me on that stuff. I don't even understand it. That's, and I get it. I don't think I'm not making fun by any stretch of the imagination, because I totally get it. But I do think we are going to have to change our thought process a little bit as we move forward, all of us. Are you writing notes about me?
No.
There's no teacher to pass this note to.
No, I told you I didn't make a whole bunch of slides because there's so much technical side to this.
Yes.
If I started doing that, then we go way down, and people would just be like, I don't care about 10,000 nodes and what they, all this stuff. So
yeah.
So I was just writing down something that I need to touch on because it's important. But along the lines of what you said, we did our little session on money, and I think if people kind of understood the history of this banking, banking goes back for thousands of years. It's one of the oldest, scams in my. And I'm nothing against bankers. Like I said before, we need to have banking at some type of level here. I got to turn my phone off here to we're at a point in the economy in the world where you have to have transactions, to grow, to secure everything, to make things better. But there's good and there's bad about banking. And right now, everything is completely centralized.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what people need to understand. We're trying to build in the grassroots. We're trying to build that parallel economy, all those parallel services, to where we don't have to depend on the government. We don't have to depend on these large corporations. We don't have to depend on all that stuff, because we can trade. Kind of like you said with the barter issue, we want to be able to do that. And up until now, we haven't had the technology to actually do that, not being face to face. So we have cash, which is kind of the ultimate check on government in a way. I mean, I wish our government would issue that, because they.
I was going to say, they just print it. How is that the ultimate check on government?
In a way, because they can't surveil you with cash. You can do whatever you want to do. They can't control you. If you have cash, they cannot control you. They can't stop you from buying. They can't stop you from selling. They can't do any. If you're 100% cash, based person, they can't control you. So that's where we run into the problem with cash. Is if you're going to go somewhere and you have a lot of cash, you're taking a very large risk. And that's kind of how banks came into existence, was back in the old days when you had large stores of assets, gold and silver, and you needed to go somewhere else. You'd go to someone like the Templars, and you'd get a certificate, and then they'd cash your, they'd cash your stuff in on the other side.
Well, and I'm older, and I remember traveler's checks. I remember going to Costa Rica. We did a rainforest ecology class when I was in at college, and so that would have been like 1998. Yeah, 1998. And we were still using traveler's checks, because we didn't even really have debit cards, that we were using at that point in time. So I mean, this isn't a new. That's not a new concept, having things being centralized so that you could have somebody guarding your assets for you, because you're right. I mean, if you went someplace and you got robbed of all of your dollar bills, you were in trouble.
Yeah. So, right now we've got some comments on here about cashless and some things like that. So there is some major differences between the cashless society that's coming and the freedom and sovereignty and independence and self-custody of cryptocurrency. And I'm just going to call it crypto, even though I don't think that's necessarily the best term. But for people, I want to just give people a little history on myself and how I got started, got into it. I've always been, kind of in business or kind of entrepreneur type stuff for a long time. Well, after the 2008 crash, major, that thing was just such a, I don't even want to get into it. But anyway, the whole thing was just complete, just recklessness by the banking system. They created products that were very bad, very toxic. They were not regulated properly. They went unchecked. So we had this major meltdown. All this stuff happened. Well, out of that came a white paper that was published on kind of like a lot of these cryptographers and people, that there was these chat rooms and all these kind of websites where these guys hung out. Well, there was a paper that was published in a cryptographic website that basically was published by an anonymous person called Satoshi Nakamoto. And in that
That's
paper,
a very interesting name to be anonymous.
Yeah. Well, they still don't know who it is, whether it's they think it's maybe a group of people, but we don't know who it is. But I'll just say he published this paper, and it was basically the white paper that outlined Bitcoin and how big. And we're going to talk about Bitcoin's kind of the main coin we're going to talk about, just because it is the oldest coin. It's the start of this whole thing. And so it's just the easiest to relate to because it's going to be the most adopted first. So we're going to talk about that. But so anyway, this white paper was written. All these guys said, hey, that sounds awesome. I'm going to go ahead and just write this code and run it and start doing it. And that's how it came about. So,
interesting.
So it kind of launched itself, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. There was things prior to that, but Bitcoin is the real breakthrough for today's time and today's technology. So you have these group of guys all running this stuff, and it's basically a communication network. And they build it. It's getting larger and larger. So just through time, I got involved. I bought my first Bitcoin back in 2015. The first ones I bought them at $200 a coin. So, and it was I just loved. I read the white paper. I saw the use case. I was like, my God, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. The government cannot touch me. This has nothing to do with big banks, big corporations, control. This to me, it really is freedom, and that's just how I've looked at it. And I've invested. I've never really been a trader. I've always been an investor. I buy projects, and I own a whole lot of projects now. I mean, I own upwards of probably 150 different projects. But Bitcoin is still, my granddaddy. It's the oldest. It's the original. It's always going to be here. The value of it will kind of, come and go, but it'll still be around. But it's just laid the footwork for what we're going to talk about.
Well, you're going to have to explain what a project is.
Well, project is so you have this technology, okay? So this technology will just in the beginning. So
cryptocurrency technology.
Yeah. So I'll kind of reference it like this. So there's multiple layers to this thing, which I didn't really make a slide on this. So we'll talk about it kind of later. But so you have a technology, just like, think about it. All this stuff is an internet protocol. Okay. So just like HTML is an internet protocol to be able to view things, on computers that are code, it translates code and it presents it to you in a visual manner, and you can do all kinds of stuff. Well, cryptocurrency, or crypto, we'll say Bitcoin, is an internet protocol also. And what it does is it allows you to transfer value back and forth without it. And well, we'll get into all that. But the way I want you to think about it, the most common sense way to think about it is there's layers to this. So Bitcoin is like at the protocol layer. So it's like HTML. Well, on top of that, you can have different websites. You can have different applications, that do different things. But the HTML, the bottom layer, is what makes it all possible, the protocol. So think about it like this. You have your cell phone, right? On your cell phone, you have all these apps, okay? You have apps for a million different things. Well, the cell phone and those apps don't work if you don't have a cell carrier, like AT&T or Verizon. And that cell carrier doesn't work if you don't have physical towers. Okay. Bitcoin and these protocol layer level cryptos are the towers in this example, in this analogy.
Okay.
So if you don't have the network of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of computers that all communicate together to process transactions, to encrypt them, to make them secure, to relay the data in real time, if you don't have that, if you don't have the cell phone towers, then you don't have anything else. So at the base level, we're at the cell phone tower level. That's kind of what we're going to talk about. There's all kinds of applications and there's all kinds of things on top of that allow it to run. But for your purposes, as someone that doesn't understand, think about your cell phone has a certain purpose, but it doesn't work if you don't have a physical network. And the bigger the network, the better. I mean, kind of rewind back when cell phones first started coming around. The networks were so bad. They were so spotty. You didn't have service everywhere. Now you can't go anywhere. You literally can go down in a basement, 5 floors down and still have service. So the networks become stronger. As they become bigger and stronger and more reliable, they're more valuable. It's going to be the same thing with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency.
Well, why don't you start from the beginning with your program, and then let's ask some questions, because every time you say something else, that generates like 40 more questions in my head.
Yeah. So let's just go. We'll just kind of start here.
Okay.
And I'm starting on the terms of why crypto equals freedom.
Okay.
So we're going to actually get into CBDCs, which is the bad. That is not what we want. That's the cashless society that big government, big corporations, totalitarian ideas and views, that's what they want. And we're going to
I think that's what you're going to have to make really clear as we go through this program is, why is it that people should use this when it's cashless?
Yeah.
I mean, it's exactly what we were talking about. There isn't a dollar bill that you can feel. There isn't something that's transacting there. And I think people like me, want to know, how is this different from the cashless society, big government thing? So, definitely we need to hit that hard.
We are going to talk about that, because cashless is the most dangerous thing out there, period. I mean, cashless is 100% control. And we're going to talk about that with China and their Sesame system and the cold credit score system, because a lot of people don't understand that. They don't even realize that it's real and it's here. But crypto is freedom. So Bitcoin, just at the base level. So I want to just kind of tell people what blockchain is and just kind of give them an idea to understand, because you hear that word, but people don't really understand what it is. So it's a distributed ledger with records that continuously get added to it. And those records are a certain size. So you can put so many transactions into a certain size of a block. That's where the block comes from. So you have just think you got an open box here. You can put so many things in the box. Then you have to close the box, seal it up, tape it up, and then you go set the box over here. Well, blockchain works the same way. So you have basically you have an open block. So all these computers are waiting here. There's transactions going. I just sent you money. I just sent someone else money. Someone just sent me money. Someone just bought groceries, whatever. So you have all these transactions. Well, the thing about blockchain is it takes all those transactions, it puts them in a single place, it verifies them all. It says, yeah, Jenny paid Michael, Michael paid Jenny. It takes into account, it automatically subtracts from my ledger and adds it to your ledger. So it's basically a digital ledger. It's just keeping track. And we're going to talk about the other aspects of that here in a second. But the beauty of it is the previous block is copied into the new block. So you have the history of the entire blockchain from the very first block that was ever, the very first transaction that was ever created. So you have all of its history, all the transactions, all the details, all the data from the old is copied into the new. And then you have all of the new transactions, everything that's new. And then you have all these computers that are working to solve a cryptographic equation to secure that, to make sure that no one can ever go back in and change it, no one can hack it, no one can steal from it, and no one can ever do anything to it.
So you're talking about a whole lot of computer space required.
No,
Really?
because yeah, it's
because it would seem to me that you're adding to the block every time, right? So if you're closing a block like you're packing, right?
yeah.
So you've done your transactions, you've closed it up, but then you're adding it to the next block so that there's a record of the previous transactions. It would seem like it would just get huge. The records would get so huge.
Yeah, I mean the block does grow, but it's all maintained within the code. But it takes electricity. What really grows is the amount of computing power that it takes to secure that block.
Oh, okay. So that makes sense. Why?
Yeah.
Because we have some friends who are into crypto mining, and they were talking about their OG&E bill one time. And I was like, how do you have an $8 million OG&E bill? And they said, you know, it requires a lot of energy to do that. That's very interesting to me. I don't think I quite understand it still, but it's very interesting.
Well, so the block sizes are set, but it takes a certain amount of energy to secure that block. And then once it's secure, it moves, you know, to the next one. But it's also encrypted. So, it's, you know, it's kind of like, think about like how you would zip a file, you know, to email it. It's too big, you're going to zip it, you're going to email it, you're going to unzip it on the other side. So if you need to unzip it or look at that block or whatever, you know, it's publicly available to do that. So this is just another one talking about the blockchain. I was going to put this on the other one, but I just forgot to do it. But you know, this just basically has all of the transaction data. Timestamps are important. You can't go back and change something. You can see the actual record of every single thing that's ever happened. It's got all the other transactional data in there.
So committing fraud then in this particular venue would be impossible.
Yeah. So
interesting.
Yeah. So what I want to really convey is the most important thing about all this, and we talked about this with money, and we talked about inflation, and the real thing about inflation is not inflation, it's the value of your money that's going down. So you brought up earlier, you know, you're trading or bartering, you know, in one way or another, you know, this for that. Well, all you're really doing is exchanging value, and that's what money is. Money is exchanging. It's a medium to exchange value between two people or in some transaction. Well, that's what cryptocurrency does. It allows you to just send value, to send and receive it to anyone on the internet. That as long as you have some kind of computer and an internet connection, you can send and receive value. Now, there's all kinds of different apps. There's all kinds of different coins. We're not going to get into all the different coins because a lot of these coins, there's coins that are going to revolutionize every single thing we do. And there's coins that are just scams, just like anything. There's good players, there's bad players, but the technology, the underlying technology is what we're going to talk about and why it's so important and why, and really why I love it on top of it, because it truly is, it's free and it's open to anyone in the world. And I'll give you an example, Jenny. I have a friend that I met just through coincidence during my campaign. And this guy does business. He's a global guy. He does business all over the world. He builds products here in Oklahoma. He sends them all over, but he needs actual product that come from like Nigeria and all these other places.
Okay.
He has to try to use the conventional SWIFT and banking system, and time is of the essence in his business. He has literally switched over to cryptocurrency, make Bitcoin payments or Ethereum or some of the, I'm not even going to say any of these other projects because I don't want to confuse anyone. But anyway, he makes payments. He'll send an email to like a guy in Nigeria and say, I need this, 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 and this. And then he'll send him a payment. The guy will have the payment, you know, within 20 minutes once a block is done. You know, every 8 minutes, all the transactions in Bitcoin, every 8 minutes or so, there's a new block that's created. So you have the ledger system. So all the different computers, once you have a completed block, so let's say I pay you, you pay me, we pay whatever, that goes into that block. 8 minutes later, that's all recorded, time-stamped, everything. That's updated across the entire network and over the entire world after that 8 minutes. So every single computer in the world that's running that blockchain, or if you have access to a web browser to go look at the transaction if you want, you can see it, within 8 to 10 minutes of that block being.
Well, and that's not the same as the Swift
Yeah.
banking method, which isn't really Swift because it can take up to 72 hours, right?
Oh,
for
well,
those transactions to be seen
Yeah.
by, whatever computer you're sending them to.
Yeah. Well, and it's even worse than that. I mean, it's all controlled by the banks, and that's how they bring in sanctions and everything else. That's how they control all these countries, Jenny, is through the American settlement system, which is the SWIFT system, because they have to trade in US dollars because of the Bretton Woods agreement with oil. So we don't have to get into all that, but
right.
The current system of the US dollar is a system of control, unfortunately. But back to this. So it connects you to global finance. It exists and is solely created on the internet. So the internet is what's made this possible. What I love the most is, and this is what people really need to take into account. Okay, so we talked about fiat money, which is basically free by the government saying, this is what we're going to do,
right.
This is what we're going to use, and this has value. Even though there's no value to it, it's just the government saying that. Think about it, Jenny, this is the first time in history that you have a monetary system that's not created or controlled by the government. The government does not issue Bitcoin. The government does not issue any cryptocurrency. It has nothing to do with them. They're completely outside of the government system. You don't need a third party. You don't need a third person to say, Michael's giving Jenny a check. Okay, well, in Michael's bank balance, his bank has to make an entry to a credit entry to take it out of his account, and then they got to go debit Jenny's account at her bank. So all this stuff, we don't need any of that. I can just pay you if I want to pay you. If I want to pay you $1 million, if I gave you a check for $1 million, Jenny, how long would it take before that was even available for you to use? I mean, it'd take weeks.
And you get they apportion it out. So you get a little bit here and a little bit there as it dribbles through the system. Yeah.
And then let's say you want to cash all that money out. What do you think you're going to have to do to cash that money out? You're going to have to wait and wait if they even let you. Now with crypto, the beauty of crypto is I can send you $1 million right now. It'll be available in your wallet in 10 or 20 minutes. And it's yours. No one has to know about it. I can send it to you. The government doesn't know. The IRS doesn't know. If you want to go buy something, you can buy something immediately. With that money.
But see, that's what the government doesn't like about it.
Well, yeah, and that's the whole thing. But it's completely outside the banking system. And the banks have no competition. This technology is not controlled by a bank. It's not a company. It's not a product. It's not a service. It's none of those things. It's an internet protocol that is basically a communication between two people. It's just like email. Email in the early days, it had its problems, but there's an actual use case for email. We've evolved our lives over the last 20, 30 years, because of email. Email has, expanded our economy. It's made everything greater. It's made everything better. It's made everything easier.
Well, it's made communication so much easier. Yes.
Yeah. Does the government control email? No. Does the government issue email? No. Email it's another protocol basically on the internet. So the internet is what's making this possible. So anyway, it's cryptocurrency is a digital currency, and it's a payout system. So, kind of early versions of this, we'll say, think of like PayPal. Think of, things like that, where you could go on and you could load money into PayPal, or PayPal was linked to your bank account, but they would process that transaction for you. You didn't have to have cash. You could, you could do commerce on the internet. Well, this is 1,000 times better. It's more secure, and it's yours. It's in your wallet, under your protection, under your custody, if you let it be. And then also, crypto is controlled. It's literally controlled by the participants in the network. The miners have a say. The participants have a say. And it depends on, what kind of project we're in, and, there's all kinds of different parameters. But the government doesn't control this. There's no one entity that can come in and issue more coins. And that's another thing. I didn't even put it in the slides.
Well, and I would even just say, make it broader and say they cannot manipulate the value of the currency.
Yeah. Well, there's always ways of manipulation, but this is very difficult to actually manipulate. So we're going to talk about this word a lot, decentralized. To me, that is the way of the future. We talk about it in our terms of shrinking government, smaller government. That's what we want. Grassroots people, this organization, we want smaller government. We don't want the government involved in every single choice and everything we do. That's called decentralized. That is the tech term for that exact same thing. This is 100% completely decentralized. You don't need, I kind of mentioned this before, you don't need a third party to verify that I'm sending you this or that, or to say that it's okay, or to anything. And we'll touch on that in just a second, but it's also immutable. You can't go back and change what happened. If I send you $1 million, I send you $1 million. I can't call the bank and say, hey, stop check on that.
Stop that check.
I didn't mean to do that. But it's also, you can't go in and manipulate that in any capacity. A financial institution or whatever, they have no ability to go in. And we know that stuff happens after the fact in the American banking system. It's fungible, which means it can be divided. And in fact, Bitcoin, the smallest, so people think, man, like Bitcoin right now is $34,000, whatever. They're like, I don't have enough money. I can't buy a Bitcoin.
Wait, stop. One Bitcoin is $34,000?
Yeah. It's going way.
Well, I'll just run right out and go.
Yeah. Well, it's going way up from there. I can make a use case. I think within the next,
Goodness.
Probably 5 to 7 years, we'll see $1 million Bitcoin pretty easily.
Well, but there's something too that, and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, because I certainly know just a teeny tiny bit about this. But unlike money, dollar bills, which can be printed at will by our government, there is only a finite amount of Bitcoin. Am I wrong?
No, it's written into the code. There's only 21 million Bitcoin that can ever exist. And I'd probably say 4 to 5 million of those Bitcoin have been lost, just because in the beginning, people didn't understand their wallets. They forgot their private keys and they forgot their passwords. I'll say they forgot their passwords to get there, because it's encrypted. It's protected for your protection, because if it's not, then anyone could just come in and steal it. And that's another thing. It's never been hacked. It's never going to be hacked. And we're going to talk about that. So a lot of these things that all happen with the major amounts of theft and identity, all this stuff, identity theft, credit cards being stolen, all that goes away with cryptocurrency. I mean, you think about the hundreds of billions of dollars that every single year are stolen through wire transfers and just ACHs and credit card all that goes away. Cryptocurrency solves that entire thing. When I have that there, can't be hacked or confiscated. And that's another thing. The banks can't come in and just shut your account down. Let's say, you get some type of ruling or something happens, the IRS, the government, somebody wants to, stop you.
Like a lien on your property, for example. You don't pay a loan and the government puts a lien on your property or something like that. Yeah.
Anything like that. They cannot touch your coins unless you allow them to. And that's what I love more than anything. That's why I have a ton of these assets, and I call them assets. Yes, they're volatile right now, because in the beginning right now, the markets are so up and down. You don't have the mass amount of people. It hasn't been mass adopted yet. So once this becomes more mainstream, once you get big institutions, piling into it, more people understand, more people are loving, what this is, how it works for them, then that's when the values of these things are going to go through the roof. But that's not why I buy it. I buy it because I believe, and I know it is the future, and I want to be way ahead of the game when it comes to having my assets in what the future technology is. But it's also, so the next point on here, it's all peer-to-peer. There's no centralized servers. And that's where all this hacking, that's where everything that gets stolen, all that happens. They attack a centralized server, a centralized bank, a centralized processor, whatever. It's a single place of contact where they see a vulnerability, these major hackers from these huge, like Russian hackers or North Korean hackers, or who, they see a vulnerability in some place. And they're like, oh, we can exploit that, because they don't have the type of network that builds like the protection like Bitcoin network does. So we're gonna talk a little bit more about that later. And here I have here, it has a fixed supply, so it's got 21 million coins. It's never going to have any more than that. Here's another thing that's beautiful about it. Every 4 years, Jenny, the supply of what comes out gets cut in half. So if I decide to
wait, what?
Yeah, so the way that it works, and there's different types of crypto, but still, again, I'm just going to talk about Bitcoin. So with Bitcoin, you basically take electricity and you mine. You're basically taking electricity, and you have a block here. You're securing that block. So just like anything that you produce, it takes energy to produce something, no matter what it is. So in Bitcoin, you're producing security. You're producing all these qualities here, being fungible, immutable. You're transacting without a third party. So it takes energy to do that. Well, the people that do that provide the computer power, that provide the network, that provide that cell phone level, the cell phone tower level of investment, into the network, they get rewarded. They're called miners. So they're putting in the power, they're spending the money to get the reward. So every block that comes out, so every 8 minutes you got a block coming out. Every block that comes out, if you're part of the people that solved that encrypted, that finished that single block, you get rewarded a certain amount of Bitcoin. So I think right now it's like you get like 6 Bitcoin. So if you're part of the thing, then
one Bitcoin is worth $34,000.
Yeah, and we might be at 3 now. I can't remember what the last. We might be at 3. I think we are. I think we're at like 3.25. So every 4 years, that miner's reward gets cut in half. Now they still get paid for processing transactions and things like that. So within a certain amount of years, there will be no more Bitcoin that's ever produced. Now that's kind of in the future. Now the next halving that we have, so let's say we're at like 3.25 now. We're getting ready to get cut down to 1.5, or whatever, 1.75. So next year, kind of mid 2024, the halving happens. So you're going to reduce the supply that's available, because right now most of the Bitcoin that's sold is not sold by people like me. It's sold by miners who are producing Bitcoin, and they need to continue to pay for all their electricity, all their computers, all their stuff. So they're getting the reward of the Bitcoin, and they're turning around and selling it into the market to receive money. Well, before too long, there's not going to be any more Bitcoin to sell. So when we hit that scarcity point and there's no Bitcoin to sell, that's how this price is going to go absolutely through the roof. Plus, you're going to have institutional investors and other people that say, hey, this thing does actually have value. It doesn't look like it's going away. More and more people are using it. We better get some now while we still can. And there's some major players. There's a lot of big time people that talk about that. So anyway, so we're going to go into CBDCs here in just a second, but what I want to show people is kind of where we've been and where we're going. So Web 1, think of the very early internet. Think of AOL, okay? It's curated. It's a walled garden. You only have access to what they allow you to see in the way that they want you to see it. So you would go on there and you would just see their website, and they'd have news articles and whatever would only be, it's kind of read only. Okay. Then Web 2, which is where we are right now, this is kind of the blogosphere. This is where you can read and write content. Okay. But it's still centralized. It's controlled by these major corporations. The entire internet is still controlled by people like Google, Facebook, Twitter, all these huge corporations. They control the content. If they want to moderate you, they can. If they want to take you off, they can take you off. If they want to throttle you, or if they want to blackball you, they can do it. Well, Web 3 is where we're going. Web 3 involves cryptocurrency. Web 3 is where We built the towers. Okay. We provided the network services. We provided the maintenance because we invested in a coin, or we supported a Bitcoin or one of these other projects. So now we're a part of the network. Okay. Now we're the one that's providing the services. And as a reward, we get rewards. We can earn dividends from that coin. We can get our share of a mining reward if we're miners in certain coins. But now we're the ones, kind of as a collective group, we can vote. Like right now, you can't vote on if Google does something bad, you can't vote on anything that that Google says. I mean, you could vote by exiting, maybe by not using their product, but Web3 is literal ownership. You own, you custody your part. You have a very small part, depending on the size of investment that you make, or the amount of coins you have, depending on the project. But now you have voting power in how things are going to happen on that network in the future. And that's another thing government doesn't want you to do. Big corporations, they don't want you having any kind of voting power, any kind of anything in any network. They want to make the rules. They want you to play by them no matter what. So that's where we're going, because crypto allows the user or the participant or the token holder, whatever you want to call them, it allows them to participate in how that network's going to run. So this is kind of, I couldn't get this actually. I was trying to make a slide. I couldn't get it right, but it's easier to just look at this, and this will kind of encapsulate how Bitcoin works and why it does what it does. So up here at the top, we have our current, what we would call assets. Okay, so we've got our land, we've got gold, we've got oil, we've got equities, which are basically stocks and things like that.
Market. Right.
Yeah, think of this on the global level. So every one of these assets, they carry some type of monetary value, that we have to defend. Okay, so we defend these things because of their value. We defend them with armies, human lives, with war. We have to defend our borders. We have to go defend our energy interests. We have to defend, corporate stocks, things like that. Okay. So those things are protected with military or rule of law or government or some capacity. So if we move down now to, halfway through, if you've got, which BTC, that's the symbol for Bitcoin. So if we look at Bitcoin here, you could substitute, any coin in this. So in the future, your house or things can be tokenized. They can be turned into you can have a digital ownership of that property or that title, or, whatever it may be. So I just put BTC in here, but BTC is protected and defended with electricity and computer code. Like you've heard me talk about before how, fiat money creates war.
Yes.
It's the same thing here. No one in their right mind would give up the scarcity of an asset like Bitcoin or any of these other assets to go fund a war. You're going to use your time, your money, your things to protect the network, just like all the other millions of people. They're going to protect the network because that's where their assets are. So anyway, this is when you take all those assets up above and you create tokens for them. Now you're protecting them in cyberspace, through electricity and like they're a commodity, the same way that like the regular markets work now, where they create paper assets, to represent your house or oil or, whatever. So you can do all this without the government. You can do this without all of this other. You can do it electronically, and it's all protected, to where it can't be hacked. So,
well, let me ask you this question, because we keep talking about electricity, and people People who know me think I think out of the box a lot of the time. So we in this country, we don't have a lot of hardened electrical assets,
Yeah.
which means because we haven't spent the money hardening them, which means to protect them from some kind of electronic pulse that would destroy their ability to carry the
Yeah.
electricity. So, what would happen if you lost electricity because some government decided to pull the EMP, the electromagnetic pulse uh, trick, and push the button, launch the nuke, and EMP'd our system? Like I said, there have been white papers and all kinds of things written about how poorly American electrical assets are protected from an EMP. So how would you in a case like that, how would you have any money?
Well, remember, okay, two things. If it depends on what the grid down situation is, it'd have to be global. This would have to be an entire grid down situation globally, because remember, this network is not defined by a country. You have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin nodes that are all updated within 8 minutes of each other globally. So you've had in the past, you've had countries like China that have completely banned and kicked out miners, stopped the entire process. But even if we were attacked here in America, okay, that doesn't change the ledger that's on a computer over in Norway.
No, but if you
South
can't
America.
get to it, then what does it matter?
Well, it depends on, yes, you have to have an internet connection to be able to do this, to actually have a verified transaction. But if we get to that point to where you don't have internet, you don't have electricity, we're basically at
back in the Stone Age.
Yeah, we're going to be toast, within a matter of months.
We're back to exchanging,
Yeah.
Rocks and shells.
Yeah. So, but to your point, let's say the West Coast gets attacked or something, or one way or another. Yes, you're going to lose service in some capacity, but that is not going to stop the perpetuation of the blockchain in any way. You're still going to have, you may not have as many computers working on the same thing towards the same thing at the same time, because half of the world is dark, but that doesn't mean they stop. So as long as you have internet access and you have some type of computer access, you can access your assets. But at the same time, I believe in this because I don't think computers are ever going away at this point.
Yeah, not at this point.
Yeah, I don't think electricity.
Unless we do have something like an EMP and half the world goes dark, I don't ever see computers going away either. They're just involved in too many processes. We've integrated them into too many things. Most of the time, human beings anymore, because of their crappy education, can figure out how to do anything other than push a button on a computer to do something anyway. So I agree with you. I don't see how there's any way in the world at this point computers are going to go bye-bye.
Yeah. Well, and a good book on that is by William Forstchen. It's called
Yes, it is.
1 minute
after.
1
second after.
Yeah, 1 second. Yeah. And
I read the whole series.
Yeah, that will really open your eyes.
As a matter of fact, that book, and we ought to talk about that just briefly. That book changed my life. It was the only book that has ever, other than the Bible, that has really changed my life. I read, it's called 1 Second After by Robert Forstchen. And he
Robert,
basically.
Did I say William? I think I said William.
Well, I think it's Robert, but it may be William. You may be right. Let me look it up on the internet, and
we know his last name
talking.
Anyway, his last name.
Yeah. And it's a book about, he actually was an engineer that worked for the United States military. And he found out that basically the United States did not have this hardening, had not spent the time to harden our electrical assets. And he just kind of devised a what if scenario for this book. And I had never, and I think a lot about all kinds of things. I mean, it's just the way my mind works. And I had never, ever thought about that. Gosh, what would happen if the electricity shut off? And that one book made me completely change the way I was living and the way I looked at things. And I don't operate the same way. I operate on a whole different frequency than I used to do because of that book. So I would just suggest that everybody gets it because it's a good read.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, really, honestly, it was a great book. I think I read that book in 4 days. But I will say this, and I will say this publicly, and I think it's out there on the internet enough for people to know. My oldest son is a diabetic. He's a type 1 diabetic, a childhood diabetic. We found out he was diabetic when he was 8. And all I could think about was what would happen if there was because if there's no way to get insulin for a type 1 diabetic, you go into a diabetic coma and you can die within 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's not like you have the opportunity to say, I'm not worried about it. It was a big concern for me. So it really changed the way we bought insulin, for example, and the way we trained him to use insulin. He did that. He looked into it himself. So there are situations like that where you do want to at least have an idea of another way to function in the event of some kind of an emergency. But I think crypto kind of goes in the same vein, because we talked about it on the program you did last time on money. The government at any point can just do a bank holiday, or they can do like they did in Cyprus, where they just decided that what the heck, we're going to take all of the money out of your accounts to be able to fund the retirement accounts that they had stolen money from. So it's really thinking about things outside of the box is so much better for you, just in terms of being prepared for anything that happens. So sorry, I didn't mean to take that aside, but please continue.
I'm with you there 100%. And, there's any kind of thing that could happen that could really, we could have, one of these meteors like that hit in Russia, a while back, that just takes out, one of these major locations that relays electricity. I agree. We're in major trouble, and it wouldn't cost that much, Jenny. That's what's so crazy is it wouldn't cost that much to actually harden the grid. And they've known about it. It's like they don't know about it. They've known about it for a long time.
Yes, absolutely. And all you have to do, if you're watching, we have lots of people watching this morning, research something called a Faraday cage.
Yeah.
For example, we keep some electronic equipment in an old microwave oven. Just in case something were to happen and, we had an EMP or whatever, we have electronic equipment that's in there in what they call a Faraday cage that would prevent it from being destroyed, the sensitive electronics from being destroyed because of that. So, it just, and people can call you a conspiracy theorist and people can make fun of you. And that's all well and good. What does it really matter to you? But just be open enough to be able to research different views and ways of thinking, because it really certainly doesn't hurt anything.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I'll just real quick, I'll tell you what I do. And nowadays, technology has made things actually deflationary in certain aspects, like computer storage.
That's true.
Not hard drives, because hard drives can fail. I have solid state drives. You can get a 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 terabyte solid state drive.
Yeah, you can. And they're nothing.
I'll just call them hard drives.
They don't cost anything for a good one today.
Yeah, they're a couple $100. Yeah. I literally have every single thing, every picture, every video backed up on one of those, and it's in a Faraday cage. It's in either a microwave or one of the Faraday bags or some type of deal because I don't want to take the chance of losing that somehow. Even if there's a natural disaster, something comes in, wipes out all my stuff, or whatever. I still want to have that.
It could be anything.
Yeah.
It could be anything. Yes.
Yeah. So
anyway, sorry. Continue. Let's get off of that.
Okay. So now let's talk about that cashless society. The words everybody hears all the time, CBDC, which is a central bank digital currency. This is the ultimate control that's coming, and they're going to install it one way or another. So that's why, to me, being outside of their system, having your own assets in your custody, not in the bank's custody, because we talked about it with money. When you put cash in a bank, it's their cash. When you have stocks or bonds or whatever, it's at that broker, it's at Morgan Stanley, it's at JP Morgan, it's in their bank, it's not in your custody. And that's what's so important about cryptocurrency, especially the evolution of it as we go in, because things are going to be in your custody. On your phone, you're going to have a little certificate here, a little token that says, this is mine, period. No one else in the world owns this. It's like digital real estate. There's only so much that can be created. You have your address, here's your little piece. But anyway, what's going to happen is, because it's already starting to happen. So when we start really moving to the cashless society, we start really moving to central bank digital currencies. They actually really officially unveil them, say they reward you. They're going to give you rewards to put a chip in your hand to be able to, have all your cash, or, what they're going to entice you all kinds of ways, just like they did in COVID. But anyway, what's going to happen is these large corporations, okay, they're going to be deputized as members of law enforcement, as in, by the intelligence agencies or by dictators in some countries. They're going to be working, these huge corporations that are centralized, where all the data is going through them in the first place. They're going to be the ones that are going to be surveilling you to know. And I put in here, this is going to be surveillance capitalism merging with the surveillance state. So you're going to have these huge corporations that take all of your personal data. Everything you buy, everything you do, it's all going to be cataloged. It's going to be put into a place, and it's going to go right into the surveillance state of the government.
Well, and I want to make a point too, if you don't mind, just really fast.
Yeah.
So I shop at Costco, and occasionally I shop at Sam's, and I realized the other day, and this is probably just stupidity on my part, probably people have known this for a long time. I'm just now catching up. But I looked at my receipt the other day, and I thought, oh my gosh, well, I didn't pay for that in cash. I did pay for it with a card. And then the next thing I knew, I was on the internet, and I was looking up, and I was getting an ad for something that I had purchased at Costco. And I realized that, oh my gosh, unless we're using cash, if we're using a card, banks have been hacked. And not only that, but banks have actually sold their information to other, third party people. And now we are kind of in a system where if you use your card, they'll find out what you bought, and they'll find out where you bought it and where you were. And it is just something that we do, I believe, have to be very cognizant about, because it's moving very quickly. It was never like that. I mean, when we had the cards issued when I was a kid, you had a card, but you had remember that little machine? It was a plastic thing, and you'd have to scrape it back and forth.
Yeah.
Right. And then give them a receipt. And then you had to, at the end of the day, because I worked in retail for a while when I was a kid, you take all of those receipts and you give them to the bank, right? Because then the bank needed to have those receipts to process the receipts to be able to go ahead and remove those funds from that person who used the credit card. Well, we're not that. No, that would actually be a preferable system.
Yeah.
Today, we're not like that. And my husband has a friend who is Chinese. His family still lives in China, and he lives here. And he went back to visit his family in China last year. And he said, I won't go back. He said that even growing up in China as a Chinese citizen and watching the surveillance mechanisms build, as he grew into an adult, he said it's nothing like he ever could have conceived. And he is literally afraid to go back. He won't go back now.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
So it happens very quickly. I think that's another thing that people don't understand. And it's what you said in our last video. So if you guys haven't watched that, go back and look at that video where we talked about money. Michael did a really great job about talking about a lot of those things, but things can happen very quickly and way more quickly than you could be prepared for them to happen. And so you really do need to think out of the box on these things and try to be prepared for anything that happens. Sorry, didn't mean to interject there again.
Well, and I use this very specifically that, a fascist dystopia will arise. And, fascism is based in people use that word wrong all the time. It's a corporate control. It's a corporate marriage between corporations and government. It's not a bunch of, grassroots right-wing people that has nothing to do with corporate control at that level. But anyway, a fascist dystopia is going to arise where every single transaction that we have, it's going to be recorded. It's going to tell them, all your habits, what you buy, what you wear, where you go.
It does that already.
Yeah, it's going to tell your politics, your associations. It's going to say where all you go, your movements, your locations. It is, because data is the new gold. I mean, it's the new oil of the future. And all this data that's basically going to be collected in a single place. That's where the decentralization comes in again. This is all going to be collected at the central bank and these corporate levels. There's only going to be 2 or 3 or 4 people in the world that have access to all of this data. And it's not going to be us, and it's going to be there for control. And if they want to, they can debank you literally overnight. They can just turn off and I'm not saying this just because other people say this. If you go like on the International Bank of Settlements on their actual website, they talk about cryptocurrency, a CBDC, coming in and why and all. I mean, they literally say it right on their website. So anyway, if we look now, people are going to be like, oh, this stuff's never going to happen, blah, blah, blah. We heard about the credit score system a while ago. Well, China has installed, the Sesame system in for their live political correctness, and negative scores, reduce your access to things. If you want to ride the bus and you got a negative score because you may have said or done something that the government didn't like, maybe you bought some ammunition, that's a no-no. Well, you don't get to go ride the bus, or you don't get to take an Uber, or whatever. So people still have cash today, so you can kind of get around that system. Even over in China, they still have the yuan, they still have the rupee, or whatever their other cash is. And
I was going to put up the book later on.
Oh yeah. And so anyway, and I don't did we have let me see if I was done.
I think the bottom one is the most important.
Well, yeah. So anyway, they still have cash. And in that system, okay, with the CBDC, there's no competition. And we know competition is the key to all of this, to all the innovation, to real freedom. You have to have competition, to produce freedom and liberty in some way. And let's see, here's a good little piece I put in here. Okay, so there's no competition for banks. So Jenny, at that point, what's the difference between the government, a bank, and an organized crime syndicate? Nothing. They're the same. I mean, we're already headed to that situation as it is. And, it's just like anything. We look at COVID, crisis is what is going to create, control of population. I mean, we've seen it literally rolled out in our eyes over the last couple of years. Hang on, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Well, between the Jake brakes of the truck going by and the dogs in the front yard and the roosters, I've been trying. Oh God, I had to mute my mic every once in a while. And I'm not trying to be ugly here. I really am not. I mean, but I do think that if you haven't noticed and that you didn't have your eyes open to what can happen in 2020, then I think you may need to really do some self introspection, because I think we saw in 2020 just the tip of the iceberg of what this country, the people who run it, are willing to do to the population and how far they're willing to go. And I think if you don't consider that, I think there's a really good chance you could end up being caught in a situation that you're not prepared for. And I just think, you don't have to go out and buy 400 acres and build a bunker. That's not what we're talking about here. But there are some things that you can do to be able to hedge your bets against, anything that can happen. Because if you can just keep, and let me pull this screen share. If you read this book, this book, this is what it looks like.
Hey, look, it's William Robert Fortune. We were both right.
Hey, look at that. All right. But if you want to kind of have a way to see the world in a completely different perspective that you might not have ever thought about before, this is a really, really well. I'll give you one example that I think is a good example here. So I told you about insulin, and the way that we felt like we wanted to look at that in a different way. One of the things that we did was we stored vitamins, because it's very shocking to think about, even though I was a biology major and I went through school and we learned about kwashiorkor and marasmus, which are nutritional diseases that are found in third world countries. Oftentimes you'll see pictures of particularly African children somewhere on the continent, and they'll have those biggest distended bellies, and it's so pitiful and sad. Well, that's from lack of nutrition. And just because you live in America doesn't mean you're always going to have access to things. And if you think that you are, the best thing that you can do is to go back and think. When we were under our COVID regulations, you can't go outside, you can't do this, you can't do that, fill in the blank. What happened to our shipping? What happened? Were you able to get certain things at the store when you finally went out? Were you able to order certain things on Amazon? What happened to your shipping pathway? That's a very tiny little threadbare setup. And I think we all learned that very, very well during 2020, is that you may decide that you want to find something, you want to go buy something, but whether it's there or not and you may even have the money for it, but whether it's there or not isn't up to you. And so plus this book was riveting. I'm not joking. I read the book in like 4 days. I did. And then I cried because, kind of disturbed me. But I mean, there's a whole series of them. I wasn't a big fan of the later books because it was like they were just trying to kind of limp the series along. But the first book is just outstanding. And I really suggest that you get it, just because it's a very interesting book, and it really allows you to develop an entirely new way of looking at things. And isn't that a good thing? I mean, really?
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to, you're responsible for yourself. No one else is responsible for you and your family. Not the government, not the state, not your employer, not, your friends. You're responsible for making sure that you have what you need to survive under, we live under just regular operations here, but you never know when something is going to happen. I mean, not that you got to be a doomsday or anything, but I tell people, just start adding some more food into your food supply into your rotation.
Correct.
You know, add another $10 or $20 in canned goods or
Yeah.
or beans or rice or, you know, whatever, you know, that has some time value to be able to store, you know, for a year or so. You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't take that much to get going. But
It just doesn't. It just
yeah,
doesn't. You're exactly right about that.
well,
I
for
mean,
me,
so
well, I know we're already 10 minutes over here, but I'll kind of wrap up with two things. So for me, the future is just like I said, it's taking responsibility. You want to have everything in your own custody. If you have gold, it wants to be at your house or in your vault or wherever you deem it to be. If you have silver, same thing. If you have land, or whatever you want it, you live on your land, so you want to be where your assets are. Cryptocurrency allows you, it's the first time in history that it allows you to have mass amounts of assets in your own custody. And if you needed to, let's say you didn't even have your phone, it's all encrypted. There's a 12-word phrase that pertains to your assets. So as long as you memorize that, as long as you know what that is, you can go anywhere in the world, get a new phone, get a new device, get new access, put your 12 words in, all your assets are there, period. You know, a lot of people don't understand that because when you travel with a lot of cash or gold or what, I mean, it's so hard to do that. You can travel anywhere in the world instantly.
well, and dangerous. You just
Yeah,
don't
it's
want
very
to do
dangerous.
that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also to buy it, we started talking about this, then I got sidetracked. So, you know, like right now, one Bitcoin is $34,000. It's going to go much, much higher, you know, in the future here. But you don't have to buy, don't think about it as a single Bitcoin. It's fungible, it's divisible. You can buy what's called a Satoshi, which is just one decimal point of the Bitcoin. And Bitcoin can be divided, a Satoshi, it can be divided, it's 1 in 100 million is a single Satoshi. So you can divide Bitcoin all the way down to 100 million, and you can buy one
Wow.
at
Wow.
1/100 millionth of the price of today's cost. So
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, this is what I do. I'm not going to tell you to do it, but if I have an extra 10 or $20, I buy a little bit and I just add into it. If I have a little bit of money here, I just buy a little bit. I just dollar cost average. I just keep buying just a little bit more.
Yeah.
And instead of buying a coffee, I'll buy a little bit of a Bitcoin. It doesn't cost that much to do that, but you're just continuously adding to your assets with money that you would just materially spend that has no value. I'm trying to build value, you know, that I own. I have it. No one else can take it. No government,
Right.
no one can hack it. No one can steal it. It's mine no matter what.
Yeah.
So that is, to me, it's on the forefront of that parallel economy, and crypto is as grassroots as it gets. Central bank, cashless society, it is the opposite. They try to paint them like they're the same, but they're completely opposite. One is controlled by a very small amount of entities. The other is controlled by peer-to-peer, large networks of people that want to get out of the system.
Well, I hate to say this, but I'm going to have to call it a day because I have somebody who is downstairs whining and scratching at the door. She wants to go outside. So,
Right?
yeah, so we're cut off by a dog.
That's all right. We're done. I said
Um,
my piece.
Well, I really do appreciate everybody watching. We had quite a few people on. I am hoping that if you guys have questions, because nobody was really in our live chat on Rumble, even though we had quite a few people watching on Rumble today. If you have questions, you can always email Michael directly at michael@rope2.org. I don't know anything about it, but if you've got questions, you can always, email me at jenny@rope2.org. So, don't let that, if you don't want to ask the questions publicly, that's fine. Just shoot us an email later on. So I want to make sure that we know what's going on Friday. Friday, Michael and I are going to talk about some very distressing things in the education news, particularly two coaches that have been investigated in Oklahoma Public Schools for essentially, I'm being kind of broad here, allowing hazing. And we need to talk about those kinds of things. And then we've got kind of some more information that I think is going to be really important for you that you'll want to tune in to see. So do tune in on Friday morning at 9 o'clock live, and you'll have a chance to kind of get in on the conversation if you'd like to as well for that. Also, too, don't forget, we've got rope regulars. I'm now calling them rope regulars because I'm so happy to have them on. We have Visit Blog that's going to be a regular, and she's going to be on the second Wednesday. And then we've got Representative Sherry Conley, who's a rope regular now. She's going to be on the second Friday of every month. And then we have Carmen Greider, who is, a lot of people tune in for dark money updates. And don't worry, I'm trying to get there. I'm just trying to, juggle, keep all of the, balls in the air at the same time. And I'll get back to it. But Carmen Greider is doing great work on accountability and accessibility to information in our election system. So you'll want to tune in on the third Friday of every month for Carmen. She'll be on, and we're working on even some other ones because it's just nice to have these people who know things and can speak intelligibly on things that we, might necessarily have to, really study to get that information out there. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us. Michael, do you have anything?
Self-custody.
Yeah.
Well,
and the thing of it is, and I was thinking about this as you were talking just a second ago, isn't that what we say about everything?
Yeah.
I mean, isn't it? I mean, we say that all the time.
Take responsibility of your child's education. It's the exact same thing. It's all layered together. They make crypto look like it's bad because it's going to decimate governments, and it's going to decimate the entire banking system in these large corporations. So I say, let's go, bring it on. I'm a proponent for it. I will always be. I love it. And it's just like you said, anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to talk about it.
Do you have a website or any resource that people could go to get just kind of immediately, if they didn't understand something that you said, to go back and really kind of look anything up? Do you have a website that you follow at all?
There's no real, there's so many people that are into it, and all these projects have their own websites. You can literally go to bitcoin.org and they'll tell you all about Bitcoin, the history and the wallets, and there's so many video tutorials on everything. There's people on top of people that have, details of information. If you want to know about a certain project, or let's say you like something in particular, you want to find a token that deals with that, like farming token. You want to be part of a farming community that
interesting
has a specific purpose. There's
wow.
It's limitless, literally.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, there you go. All right. Well, Michael, I really appreciate you being on today and explaining all of that stuff to us, because I, for one, am just completely clueless, sadly, about this. So, thank you for being on with us, and we will see everybody again on Friday. And so have a great rest